The wind had been working the land since before dawn, and by mid-morning it had carved hollows in the snowdrifts like
Time to
breath
hit
on
the trail.
glass. It hissed across the prairie in long, low moans, tugging at the boards of the empty barn, the corners of the tarp flapping on the haystack, the hem of her coat. The girl stood just beyond the porch boots sunk ankle-deep in crusted snow face,
Easy there, boy.
turned
Let's
from the
get you
house.
inside.
The baby was
That's it,
slung
good
to her
fella.
chest, wrapped in a thick wool blanket. The others were inside quiet for once. The man had left before sunrise again. She'd watched his truck go red taillights swallowed by the falling white. No note this time, not even a lie. One of the chickens lay dead under the co-op ramp, stiff legs kicked out like it had been trying to escape. She stared at it a while.
You don't
Maybe
scare
it
me.
froze.
You should be
Maybe
scared.
something got
Not
to it in
today!
the night.
Then draw!
Either way, it was done for.
Here you are, fresh from the
The
pot.
baby stirred and whimpered, face
Enjoy it while
pressed
it's hot.
to her collarbone.
It-
She shifted her weight and rubbed its back with her gloved hand. Her knuckles ached from cold and last night's dishes. The fence at the edge of the field leaned wrong. A line post had snapped in the wind and the wire hung low like tired arms. There was always something needing fixing.
This one is almost
Some part
ready.
of the place
Good. I'll check the
sagging,
bridle.
breaking,
Looks set.
coming
Let's get
apart.
moving.
She'd known better. Her mama had told her before she passed, "A man who says he needs saving wants a mother, not a wife." But she'd been 20 and stubborn and lonely. Now she was 28 and still stubborn but tired in her bones. A truck engine rumbled in the distance, slow, steady. Not the same sound. Not him. She turned, shielding the baby, watching the road. It was an older Ford, dulled green paint dust streaked windows. It came slow up the drive, tires crunching snow, and stopped a ways back from the porch. Driver didn't get out right away. Just sat there, engine idling, steam rising in short breaths from the exhaust. She didn't move. Her body had learned not to flinch at strangers. When you had 5 young mouths and no man to stand in front of you, you learned to square your shoulders and look people in the eye. Dr. Creaked open boots hit snow. A man stepped down, tall, broad at the shoulders. Brown coat, worn hat, pulled low. He walked like someone used to working alone, steady but not in a rush. She recognized him before he said anything. Not by name, but by type. Ranch hand. Drifter. Maybe a neighbor come to check or someone looking for work. The sort that lived quiet and left quietly too. He stopped a respectful distance from her and tipped his hat. "Ma'am." She nodded once. The baby made a sound and she cupped its head instinctively. He looked past her to the leaning fence. "That your post down?" "I reckon it is." "You need it fixed." She narrowed her eyes. "You offering?" He shrugged, calm. "I've got time. And a good arm. No charge." There was a pause, long enough for the wind to push snow between them. "I don't have coin to spare," she said flatly. "I didn't ask for any," he replied. She looked at him hard, searching for the angle. He met her gaze without pressing. "You eat?" His brow lifted. "Yes, ma'am. There's beans and cornbread inside. I'll warm it if you're fixing that post." His mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "That's fair." She turned without waiting and went inside. He followed after knocking snow off his boots. The cabin was warmer than outside, but not by much. The stove was going, but the last of the chopped wood was in the bin. The 4 children looked up as the man stepped in, 2 on the floor playing with whittled horses, 1 perched on the bench with a book, the oldest girl holding a baby bottle. "Go on," she told them. "He's fixing the fence." No one questioned it. They were used to making room for trouble or help. The man didn't sit. He took his hat off and stood near the door, hands respectful at his sides. She brought him a plate, hot beans and cornbread that had gone dry at the edges. He thanked her and ate with quiet precision like a man raised to be grateful. When he finished, he handed the plate back and said only one thing before heading out. "I'm not here to take." just here to help. And for some reason that broke something in her chest she didn't know had held out this long. The hammering started not long after he stepped back outside. She stood at the window, arms crossed, baby quiet against her chest, and watched as he worked alone. No show to it. Just set his weight into the task and fixed what was broken. Snow still came down light now, like sifted flour, catching on his coat and darkening the fabric. The children went back to their ways as if the arrival of a stranger was no more than a change in weather. They had learned how fast people came and went. Their little hearts, she sometimes thought, had grown roots and bark around them. She wrapped the baby tighter, pressed her lips to its head. No name yet. She hadn't settled on one since the man who'd made her promise to help had vanished before the birth. Just run into town, he'd said, and never come back. There was always a storm or an engine problem or some woman waiting with a better reason to stay gone. She had stopped inventing stories for him. By late afternoon the wind had calmed. The stranger had finished the post and gone down the line, writing 2 more before calling it done. She met him at the porch this time, holding a mug of coffee that had gone lukewarm. Here, she said, offering it. He took it without fuss, sipped. Fence'll hold now. For a while anyway. She nodded. You from around here? Not anymore. Grew up over by Dry Creek. Folks are gone now. What brings you back? He looked out over the field. Looking for something steady. Landed in Elk Ridge last week. Helpin' a man with cattle. He heard your name mentioned at the feed store, said there's a widow woman up here with a busted barn and 5 little ones. Figured you might need a hand. Her eyes tightened. Not a widow. He didn't blink. Still alone, sounds like. She didn't answer. The coffee steamed faintly between them. I ain't here to judge, miss. Just looking to be useful. You got a name. Luke. He paused. Luke Merritt. Ruth Avery. He gave a small nod, then handed the mug back. Appreciate the coffee. You've got a strong place here. It's barely standing. It's still standing. She didn't know what to say to that. He adjusted his coat, looked toward the barn. Your roof's giving. You've got water getting in. I know. I could come by tomorrow? Help brace it up. Her hands tightened where they gripped the porch rail. She wanted to say no. Pride was heavy even when cracked. But the image of the sagging beam of waking to find calves sick or hay-ruined pushed through her silence. I'll feed you again, she said. I'll be here at first light. He walked off, boots leaving prints that filled slowly with snow. She watched until the truck was gone from sight. That night she lay on the worn mattress with the baby at her side and the others tucked into quilts nearby. Wind ticked at the windows. Her body ached the way it always did, shoulders sore, wrists stiff, ribs tight with worry, but her mind was louder than usual. She kept thinking about his voice. Not the words so much, but the way he spoke them. Like a man with no need to prove anything. Like someone who had learned not to talk over pain. She got up before dawn, same as always. Stoked the fire-boiled oats, cracked eggs into the skillet, split the last of the kindling. The cold had crept in heavy through the night, and her breath puffed out in clouds as she moved. He was there by sunup, as promised, carrying a toolbox and a length of fresh timber. He didn't knock, just gave a quiet warning as she stepped out. She pointed to the barn. Mind your head in there. Always do. They worked in silence most of the day. She helped where she could, mostly clearing space, steadying boards. Her muscles weren't built for lifting, but she'd learned how to lean her weight just right. She noticed small things. He kept a pencil tucked behind one ear. He hummed under his breath now and then, low, wordless tunes that sounded old. He stopped once to hand her a jar of water without asking, as if he'd seen the tremble in her hand and thought better than to point it out. When they took a break sitting on the barn step, he asked about the children. She answered a little at a time. Their names, their likes. How her oldest could gut a trout faster than most grown men. He smiled at that, slow and real. You did all this on your own? I didn't plan to, but plans don't hold. He looked at her, the kind of look that saw too much. She changed the subject. You said you're helping a man in town. Yates runs cattle just south of the ridge. Doesn't pay much, but the bunkhouse stays warm. She nodded. I know his wife. She brought me flour when the baby came. They're good folks. He set his coffee down. I'm not looking to crowd your life, Miss Avery. But I'll keep coming by if you'll let me. There's work to be done, and I'd rather do it here. She didn't say yes, but she didn't say no either. And that was the first day she didn't feel completely alone. Stay with us, because the frontier always has another truth to reveal, another soul to test, and another fire to light. Subscribe now. By the third week his tools had taken up quiet residence in her barn. An old saw hung beside the feed hooks, a hammer resting on the bench like it belonged. He came early, left late, worked without talking unless something needed saying. The children had stopped watching him with wary eyes. They brought him apples, asked questions about horses and nails and what snow tastes like on top of the mountains. Ruth still didn't ask questions. She offered warm meals and helped when she could, but she watched him the way you watch a river you don't trust not to flood. It was cold that morning, colder than usual. Frost bloomed thick across the windows. The hens didn't come out of their roost, and neither did the baby, curled against her shoulder with tiny fists like knotted roots. Luke arrived late, for once, boots coated in red dust instead of snow, which meant he'd been farther south. She was hauling water from the well, her back already aching, her breath steaming up around her scarf. You all right? She asked when she saw his face, pale, mouth drawn tight. He nodded once. Had to go see about a man. She raised her eyebrows but didn't press. Instead, she handed him the second bucket. They worked the rest of the morning, shoring up the lean to near the barn, but there was a weight between them. Not unfriendly, just heavy. He kept glancing toward the ridge. She pretended not to notice. Later, when the children had gone inside and the wind had picked up again, he finally spoke. My brother's sick, he said. Real bad. Doctor says it's his liver. She wiped her hands on her apron. He close by, down near Reading. 4 hours with the road good. Are you going? I was. Wild. Thought I should. But he's been mean as a snake since we were boys. Burned every bridge. Said he didn't want company. She studied his face. He looked tired in a way that didn't show up just in the eyes. A deep tissue kind of tired. You still thinking about going? She asked. He hesitated. Not sure. Sometimes it's not about what they want, she said softly. Sometimes it's about what you need to say before the chance runs out. He looked at her long and hard, then nodded like he was pocketing the words for later. That night, as the children slept and she sat mending socks by lamplight, she realized her hands weren't shaking the way they used to. The cold still hurt, the hunger still lurked, but something in her was standing up straighter. Luke came every day after that, but slower, more careful. They talked more. About small things. The war. Horses. The price of feed, and how he once drove cattle through a lightning storm so bad it split a tree in half beside him. He had a softness he never pointed at. Once she saw him kneel beside her youngest and tie the boy's boot with hands that had once broken wild mustangs. One evening, after the children were asleep and the sky was the color of ash, she found him out by the fence, just standing there, looking west. She brought 2 mugs of coffee, stood beside him. Something on your mind? He took the mug and stared out across the plain. I've been thinking about staying. She didn't speak. He went on. Not just through winter. Longer, if that's all right. She watched the breath rise off his shoulders, saw the stiffness in his jaw. He wasn't asking for a promise, just a place to put his hands, a place to rest. "You're not trouble," she said. He looked at her confused. "That's how it starts," she said. "Someone shows up means well then, trouble follows. I'm not that man. I'm not that girl anymore." Silence stretched, wind in the wires, snow starting to fall again. "You don't have to say yes," he said. "I know." She looked at him, then really looked. Saw the scar on his temple, the way he held his weight like someone used to falling. "I won't stop you from staying," she said at last. He nodded slow. "All right." They stood like that a while, and something between them shifted, not loud, not grand, just real, and it was enough. By late January, the roof no longer leaked, the porch steps were solid, and the barn door swung straight on its hinges. Ruth walked the land each morning before the children rose, and each morning it felt a little less like she was carrying it on her back. It was still hard, still raw, but it no longer felt like she was drowning in it. Luke had taken to sleeping in the old smokehouse behind the barn. He never asked to come in, never crossed her lines. He split wood, carried water, taught the children how to lash poles and patch canvas. The littlest called him the man, the others called him Mr. Luke, but they'd begun waiting by the window for his arrival. One morning, while the snow still clung to the trees in thick white sleeves, Ruth came out to find him brushing down the old mare. His back was to her coat, dusted with hay. There was a quietness in the air, the kind that came before hard truths. She crossed the yard and leaned against the post. "You leave your horse in Reading." He glanced back, a small flicker in his eyes. "Didn't make it that far. Stopped in Dunning. You see your brother?" "No." He ran the brush in slow, steady strokes. "He passed 2 days before I got there." She didn't speak right away. "I stayed for the burial," he said. Said a few words. No one else did. "I'm sorry." He nodded, jaw working. "I wanted to hate him. Wanted it simple. But when I saw him lying there, he just looked like a tired man. That's all? Not a monster. Not a ghost. Just worn down." Ruth looked out across the pasture where fence posts poked through the snow like ribs. "That's the part they don't tell you. How the anger wears out before the grief does." He didn't answer, just kept brushing, his hands slowing. That night, as wind tore at the eaves and snow piled in quiet corners, Ruth dreamed of water, rising up over the fields, swallowing the house, the barn, the trees. And she was alone, holding her children above the waves, her arms shaking. Then Luke was there beside her, not lifting them, just holding her steady. It was only a dream, but when she woke there were tears on her cheeks and her heart ached in a new way. February brought thaw. Not full spring, but patches of brown grass where the sun hit just right. One afternoon the oldest boy ran in from the field panting. "Ma, there's a letter," he said. "From town." She took it, fingers numb. There was only one person who still had her address, his mother. She hadn't heard from her since the baby was born. She opened it at the table, children clustered close, Luke standing near the stove. Her eyes moved slow over the words, then stopped. "He's coming back," she said quietly. The room went still. "Who is Luke?" asked. She looked up. "The man who left. The children's father. He says he wants to see them. Says he's changed." Luke said nothing, but the lines in his face deepened. "He never lifted a hand to help," she said. "Not once. And now, do you believe him?" "No." "Then why let him in?" "Because they're his too." Luke didn't argue. He just nodded once and walked outside. That night was sharp with tension. Ruth sat awake long after the children slept, staring at the fire. The letter was folded on the table. Her stomach curled every time she looked at it. Luke didn't come the next morning, nor the one after. On the third day she found herself on the ridge near the western fence line, eyes scanning the horizon like she'd done during the worst months, waiting for something to show itself. She saw his truck before she saw him parked off the road near the dry creek bed. He was there sitting on the tailgate staring at nothing. "You ran," she said when she reached him. "I stepped back. Same thing." "No. One hurts you. One protects you." Her chest ached. So which one was this? He looked up at her. "I don't know." Silence. "I was going to ask you," he said. "Before that letter came, I'd been thinking about it for weeks." "Ask me what?" "If you wanted me to stay. For good." The wind blew dust across his boots. He didn't look away from her face. "I don't want a savior," she said. "I know. I don't want a man who makes promises he can't keep. I know that too." She stepped closer. Her voice broke a little. "But I don't want to walk the rest of this alone." He stood slow. He wasn't a big man, but he looked steady, like something that wouldn't fall in a storm. "I ain't asking to take his place," he said. "Or theirs. I'm just asking to build something with you. From the ground up." Ruth felt her throat tighten. "And if he shows up and says all the right things, I'll still be here. I won't fight him. But I won't leave you." Her eyes filled. And then he said the sentence. Quiet. Firm. "You don't owe him your future just because he gave you your past." It was like a key turning in her chest. She reached for his hand. They walked back together side by side, boots sinking in the thawing dirt, saying nothing more. There was nothing left to argue, nothing left to prove. Ruth's hand stayed in his, her fingers raw and rough, his palm calloused and warm. When they reached the house, the children were on the porch. The little one with the skinned knee was calling for the cat, the baby was bundled and toddling crookedly toward the step, and the oldest girl had one eye on the road, still watching, still waiting. Ruth's voice came clear. "Come inside, all of you. It's going to snow again." They obeyed, filing past Luke like he'd always been part of the frame. Inside, the cabin smelled like stew and wood smoke. She lit the lamps, stirred the pot, passed him a bowl without speaking. He ate slow. The children gathered near the hearth, and no one asked questions. Sometimes the silence says more. That night she stayed up again, but not with worry. She patched the baby's quilt and listened to the wind. Luke was in the smokehouse, and she could see the lamp still glowing faint behind the shutters. It was enough to know he was there. The next day the ex came. He pulled up in a city car, clean tires, fresh coat of paint. He stepped out in boots that hadn't seen a day of mud in years, smiling like a man who thought smiles fixed things. The children hung back unsure. Ruth met him on the porch. Luke stayed by the barn. "Ruth," the man said, spreading his arms like he was home from war. "You look good." She didn't answer. "I thought I'd come see the kids. Figured it was time." "They're inside," she said. "But you won't be." He blinked, caught off guard. "What?" She stood square. "You left. You didn't write. You didn't send food. And now you want to step in like winter never came. I'm their father. You're the man who made them, but you haven't earned the rest of the title." He stepped forward. "I just want to talk. You had your chance. You don't get to waltz in here because your guilt got loud." He looked toward the barn. "That him." She didn't follow his gaze. "That's not your business. You think he's better than me." She took a breath, steady and sure. He never made promises. He just showed up, and kept showing up. That's what makes him better." The man's face twisted, all charm gone. "You're making a mistake." "Maybe," she said. "But it's mine to make." He didn't stay long after that. She didn't watch him drive off. Luke came up the steps once the car was gone, quiet, respectful. "You all right?" "I'm fine." "Want me to take the kids for a walk?" "No," she said, softer now. I want you to come inside." That evening they sat on the porch after supper. The children were asleep, the sky was turning the color of tin. She passed him the worn tin box that held her late mother's things, ribbons, letters, old tokens. "I've been carrying this around too long," she said. He opened it, slow, gentle fingers brushing the paper. "My mama always said life doesn't give you peace," Ruth said. "You build it, nail by nail, day by day." He looked up. "Then let's build it." She nodded. "We start tomorrow." They married in March, quietly. Just them, the children, and a neighbor preacher with tobacco on his breath and Bible verses folded in his coat. No rings, just vows spoken with weathered hands, clasped words like fence posts meant to hold. Spring came soft that year. The creek thawed. The calves were born strong. The garden took root like it had been waiting for something sure. The last image was this, a warm morning, a line of laundry snapping on the rope, Ruth hanging clothes with the baby wrapped to her back, Luke chopping wood near the fence. The children running barefoot through thawed mud, shrieking, laughing. The house full of small sounds, ordinary and sweet. She turned, caught his eye, and smiled without words. He smiled back. And that was the beginning. If the silence of this land spoke to something deep inside you, subscribe and let the next story answer back.